Well, for more on the success and struggles of startups in Mexico, I spoke to Jorge Rios. He's an entrepreneur and co-founder of Bridgefy. I began by asking about his experience as a Mexican entrepreneur in Silicon Valley.
We raised a little bit of capital a year ago. So with that money, we could move to San Francisco, where we stayed at a hostel. We didn't exactly pay to stay there. With money, we paid by working for the hostel, like building beds and cleaning and stuff like that. So that was a hard part, one of the hard parts. And then the other hard part was just starting a network from zero. I think that the people that you know and the connections that you have are very, very valuable in this world or this ecosystem. So we had to start from zero, and we just had to start going to events and meeting new people and stuff like that.
And how has the ecosystem changed for Mexican entrepreneurs in Silicon Valley since you started?
There is a very large amount of Mexicans in Silicon Valley, especially in San Francisco and Burlingame and Palo Alto. Fortunately, we're very capable and we're a very smart nation. Nevertheless, we do have our struggles like every other non-American people who migrate. But the technology sector in Mexico is just starting to grow, but it's nevertheless growing slow but steadily.
Are there any areas where Mexico is thriving in terms of other startup sectors?
There are a lot of companies that are working with the human capital that we have in Mexico. There are several successful companies that are working with collaborative economies, such as Aliada. There this startup that is doing very well, that they hire people like domestic helpers, and they make them more accessible for people who need help cleaning their houses or cleaning their gardens or just tending to their children and whatever. So, and on the other side, we have transportation issues in Mexico, and there's another startup called Kangu, like kangaroo. Kangu is basically a bike delivery service, and it's starting to boom in Mexico because it's a niche. These two examples are attacking a niche in Mexico that is very rich and is very big, but has been ignored in the past by everybody.
Now, one of the things that you mentioned in a recent article was the Mexican Valley of Startup Death. Explain to our viewers what that means.
So in that article, I mentioned that it's like a vicious circle because you can't generate users. Well, it's hard to generate users without traction, and they won't invest in you. You won't get that money if you don't have that traction already. So it's really, really tricky, especially in Mexico.
Now let's move on to how startups are perceived in Mexico. In your article, you mentioned that often it's seen as what you do when you can't find a job. How is the perception now in Mexico?
Right. It's we like to joke by saying that when you say I'm in a startup, it's like saying I'm in a rock band 20 years ago, and a lot of people still don't take it very seriously because they hear you saying, "Oh, I'm building an app," and automatically they think it's a game or it's something that's not really life-changing for anybody. I in that article I put the example of telling somebody, my mom telling somebody that, oh, my son is in a startup, and then they asked my mom, oh, did he lose his real job? So that actually happened. A lot of people are starting to pay attention to startups. Nevertheless, there's a very, very large fear of just quitting your job and going after something that you believe in and something that's yours.
Now, the government is also trying to get in and creating a good environment for startups. What more do you think needs to be done?
Well, number one, it's corruption. So there's a lot of funds that are being distributed to VC funds that are not really putting the money where it should be. But on the other side, they have these rules where you can't dedicate the capital that they give you to paying salaries or to hiring people, which is basically like in a normal startup that's not related to manufacturing or selling hardware. It's basically between 60 and 75% of your expenses. So if you can't hire your team, if you can't pay your own salary so you can pay rent and buy food, then there's really no point in getting maybe 1.5 or 2 million pesos from the government if the only things you can spend them on are maybe buying tablets or buying equipment that you don't necessarily need in an early stage.
What would you like to see happen? How would you like to see the relationship develop between Silicon Valley and Mexico?
We're thinking of going mobile, and we're thinking of just building these services that are for maybe developed countries, but we're ignoring that we're surrounded by 120 million Mexicans that create whole new markets for us. And so it's that, and I think that investors in Silicon Valley and accelerators in Silicon Valley should pay attention to the markets that are outside of the United States. So it's basically thinking outside the box, where the box is the United States.